Welcome everyone to ACYA newsletter interview. I'm Ali Zhu, the publication director of ACYA National. Joining us today, we have Melbourne-based Chinese-born and educated artist Zhou Xiaopin, who has dedicated in integrating Chinese and Aboriginal art for almost 30 years. So Mr. Zhou, welcome. So today, we will be exploring how the Aboriginal arts and Chinese traditional art meet at Mr. Zhou's artwork and his unique experience of collaborative art. So Mr. Zhou, can you please share with us about your background and introducing yourself?
Yeah, in this subject, I have been, for a long time. Many years ago, when I first came to Australia for my first exhibition in Melbourne. Then after the exhibition, the exhibition is about the Chinese landscape. I was trained as traditional Chinese painter, painting on the landscape, mountains, flowers, all that stuff. That was the first exhibition in Melbourne. Then after that, I thought I should do something, when I was in Australia, then bring back the experience or some work back to China, have another exhibition. But took me a little while to fit in this landscape or country. So which means it's not really exciting, this urban, I'm talking about when I'm coming to Australia in Melbourne, just urban in the city. It's not really exciting for me, which is, I have been traveling when I was in China, I have been to many places, Yellow Mountain, or lots of rivers, landscape, so exciting, very powerful. But then in Melbourne, the people, my friend was recommending me, say, you should go into outback of the Australia. Yeah. So then I took a bus, went to Alice Springs. So that was first after the exhibition, probably about a month after. So then, then I saw Aboriginal people from first time.
Yeah. So I noticed that, so you also talked about you have been involved in the Aboriginal community for quite a long time, starting from 80s, I guess. So my question might have been brought up quite often, but please tell me a little bit about the process of how you've been involved in the Aboriginal community in the Northern Territory. And for example, what is a typical day like when you were in the bush?
Well, from the beginning, that was by accident, really. So I did not know anything about Australia or Aboriginal people. That is start from the first trip when I was in Alice Springs. Then I saw Aboriginal people in Alice Springs. So then I was wondering, who these people. This first time for me to see it. But later, the people would say, okay, this is the Aboriginal people. And also I was really inspiring by their artwork. Some rock paintings, some artwork paintings. That was dot paintings. They start from that. They also, I'll be told that people say, this artist is not be treated as normally we talking about, and went to art school or have master or teaching or that stuff. Yeah. It's not really, Then I thought, all the pattern, all the design, the color is so beautiful. I've never seen before. So then that was really attracted to me, to follow up and see the people, the artists, how they did the painting, what is the story behind each painting. Because when you look at the Aboriginal painting, with all the dots paintings, you did not really know what is the real tale about the story. You only can see the beautiful color and also patterns. Yeah. But of course, they should have some meaning, behind that. But each artist, when they're doing the painting, always, what is that? So then I try to follow up and catch up, or to meet some Aboriginal people, artists from local. Took me about a few weeks in Alice Springs to get into the group people, right? And how do I get into that is a bit more tricky, is because we did not know each other at that time in Alice Springs, and I don't think you have any Chinese in Alice Springs at that time, even not a restaurant or stores, nothing, right? They see me as a very strange, person in the around it, and also asking people about all the stories and who did the painting, who is the artist. So later, that would become, so we made quite a good connection between me and the Aboriginal people. I learned quite a lot, but then I still need help. Even we say the local people, then I went to land council. There was a Bob, this one young man. He's recommended me, say, if you're really interested in Aboriginal culture or arts, you should go into Arnhem, which is Northern Territory, next to the Darwin. So whole thing is from beginning, which is from Melbourne to Alice Spring to Darwin or Arnhem, and just step by step is very straightforward. He's coming to say one step, to Alice Spring to Darwin. And for many other people, probably in Australia, probably not easy to get it. Even today, if you want to go into Darwin, you probably not easy. You need to get a permit to go, and who accepted you, and who's your connection, and what do you do in Ireland. But for me at that time, it's quite I may not say easier, but it's very lucky for me, just get one step into the heart of the community or culture. In the daily life, Alice Spring is more like a desert, and also if we're talking about it in the Ireland, there's bush. That's quite different. Language different, and the culture is quite different. Law is different. They have many different things. And in the Ireland, we do. First time I was in there, just like Aboriginal people, daily life, we fishing a lot. Sometimes hunting, drive, around to and sometimes we're traveling. When we're talking about traveling, we say, okay, you're traveling from city to Melbourne to Sydney, Melbourne to Cairns, Queensland. Yeah, that's your traveling. But in the bush, in Ireland, we do also traveling as well, from one community to other. And every country is different when we look at, there's all the different, language different, and people, talking different stories. That is basically the general, daily life. And also sometimes, it's not very often, but sometimes when the people passed away, we have to attend ceremonies, funerals. Time to time, sometimes depends on the season. That's all that about the Aboriginal law.
Yeah.
This is just general life. It's not, I cannot say very exciting as people mentioned, or imagine, let's say, okay, that's the bush, it should be very different. It is different, but it's not that different as like we're thinking maybe very exciting. It is exciting for many people, but if we as local people, just like, general, it's okay. But I quite like it. I did not feel any difficult. Of course, the difficult life it is, eating, sleeping, washing, it's all different. Sometimes we don't have much shower, just having the river, sleeping in the sleeping bag, or sometimes we just get a swag, a small tent, open 24 hours open, just sleeping in the natural in the bush.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, which leads me to my next question. So I noticed that there were quite a few paintings in your exhibition that were collaborative art with the Aboriginal artists. And I think it's quite radical to integrate a very, I would say, different concept of art with a very unique styles and images like Aboriginal visual art. So how do you manage to collaborate with them, with the Aboriginal artists?
Okay, collaborating with the Aboriginal artists, first of all, you have to be as a friend. For instance, my first collaboration with the Aboriginal people was the Jimmy Pike. Jimmy Pike from Broome, Western Australia, right? We have been friends for a long time, and then later, just something coming up, I say, okay, Jimmy, I'm going to meet you in the Broome. He always say, okay, come over, and then we just just have live. He took me to Fitzroy Crossing, which is he went there quite often. Then we lived together under the tree, which is his second home in the Fitzroy Crossing. Then we just camping on the tree and lived there. Then we just went out hunting again, looking for goannas. Others just doing that. And there's some time when we get it tight because we're all artists. Jimmy's an artist, I'm an artist. We come together and we just have to do some drawings and paintings, drawings. So that kind of the progress, so there was quite a natural, quite free and natural. We did not really plan to what do we do for first painting or second painting, what the theme or that, just coming out to naturally happen. The painting, the drawings, the story all about our life in the bush, and he told me lots living experiences in the bush, but showed me how to hunt the animals, look at the tractors on the ground, and many other things, digging the wood hole, honeybees and other things, many, there's all the life experience in the bush, how to live there. And then we come in, this is all about the painting, then we interpret this life experience into the artwork. Right, then we have the first exhibition in China, which is, so here I should mention that the exhibition, the drawing exhibition between Jimmy and myself, first time in China was in my hometown, Anhui province. This Aboriginal art has been introduced in China for first time in 1996, I think. Okay. Yeah, then 3 years later, we had a drawing exhibition again in the National Gallery of China in Beijing. Mm-hmm. So then after that, many Australia Aboriginal, art, culture, activities, everything has started to, has been introduced in China, right? Mm-hmm. That was the first. The second collaboration, I'll talk about some major. I have several, I have, I can't say about 4 or 5, maybe 6 collaborations between me and different Aboriginal artists. But second major collaboration with Johnny Bloom was with Johnny Bloom. Yeah. He came from the Alumni, right, with Asia. So between Johnny and, we were, for a long time as a friends. I think we know each other since early 90s in Maringrida, in Alumni. So really, collaboration with we're talking about here, I think is about the project we talk is the Xiaoping project. Xiaoping, the story of the trading stories between the Aboriginal Macassans and Chinese. So that was about more than 10 years ago. Yeah, more than 10 years, 12 or 13 years ago. I invited Johnny to come over to Melbourne. Then we had working or living in my studio. So then we do a lot of work. But for that project, we have planned it, not like the first one with Jimmy Pike. The second one, we planned it, we have theme, and what do we do, what do we paint, how we designed it, and after that, how we displayed it, what's the story behind each. So very, very well planned for the collaboration, right? So when Johnny was in my studio, we just say, talking about the history in Macassans, right? Macassans, Aboriginal Macassans. And hundreds of years ago, the Macassans come over to Australia, collected Xiaoping, and they made it, to my knowledge, I think this is the first Australia trading in Australia history, right? That trade is between the Macassans and Aboriginal people, right? So there's a lot happening in Alumni, Oka Island, and Maringrida, Yirrkala, in all that region. So then we have the story, we have the subject, we have the theme. So we're going to, as two artists we collaborate, we do, is how we're going to interpret the story into the visual arts, right? So most of the time is, Johnny started paint on the canvas, And of course, before he started, we have discussed it. We do have lots of discussion, and what he going to paint, would think about the story, and what are going to do later. So most of the time, you know, we're all very, very happy as the two artists working together, you know. So that is how that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's quite extraordinary to see how two different art concepts can come together and collaborate and produce artwork. So please help us better understand what is the similarity and differences that you see in Chinese and Aboriginal art.
Similarities, it's quite different, really. You know, Chinese art or Aboriginal arts, you can look at it, visually look at it, they are very different. And in the culture sense, it's very different. It's a lot of difference. Instead, we say have a lot, some similarities, right? But if you similarities, sometimes when we talk about there's all both of them, there's all the, you know, Asian, very old culture. In the Chinese art, for Chinese painting, we're talking about the traditional painting.
Yeah.
You know, landscape, like a scroll painting, all that stuff. Right? There is a lot artistic the concept in the painting. For instance, the Chinese artists, they do, you know, they try to say 4 seasons, and they use some different flowers from the season to represent the season, and also explore the artist's thought. The thoughts did not give you the straight away, give you the very clear, straight image. They only, you know, they always behind use the items or images, you know, to explore the artist's thought, you know, emotion, all that stuff, you know, it's a lot. With original art, you can see lots of pattern. That is another, you know, visual language, right? But also they are represent something very meaningful as well, right? It did not give you say, okay, this is the person, okay, what he looks like, what's the flower look like? They always have another meaning behind the pattern. For instance, like a waterhole, right? Like a lost circle, right? Lost circle. And then there's the waterhole, right? And if you look at the people that like if the people that painted the U, you know, like a U, right, that represent as a people, a person, right? How that looks like a person, if you sit on the ground, your legs is out, and you look at from the top, they just you just looking like a U. And they always, and sometimes they use the triangle, to represent the wing, the stones, the wings, the rain, all the stuff, right? So, what basis are we talking about the pattern? Sometimes the pattern, some from Ireland, some from the Western Australia or desert. It's quite different. To me, as artists, I traded as a traditional Chinese painter, but also I learned as quite a lot about Western culture, you know, particularly with all the concept, how you curate, developing the work or paintings in the concept. You know, this is quite different. The philosophy is different between culture, and also different in the Aboriginal culture as well, right? Aboriginal culture. So to me, is they're all very important. Sometimes I do the difference is more attractive to me. I'm talking about the culture difference. It's something very different. Some culture is very different, even more attractive to me. I'm not looking for...
Sorry to interrupt. So when you're talking about like the differences in culture, what is the differences you are talking about? Can you
give us an example?
Yeah.
No, that's a lot different. Just we're talking about the use of the images, how you use the images, the form, materials, the way you're thinking. You know, okay, let's give the thinking for the view. Say Chinese painting. You look at the Chinese painting, the landscape, right? Then you look at it from, you draw the tree, mountain,
Yeah.
or hill, the trees. Okay, you look at it from the artist from this point to this point. And when you finish it, and you continue to paint behind this tree as another level, it's more like you painted it when you moved. You moved and you painted it. You moved and you painted it. Right? It's not like a one focus.
Yeah.
For Western painting, many traditional, you say, you always stick with the one point as a view focus, and look at this one, always from one point. But for Chinese painting, yeah, not. It's more than more than one focus. Aboriginal painting is more like a bird's view from the top. We look at it from this distance. Right? I'm talking about in the desert, dot paintings in the desert, right? Aboriginal but dot paintings, you always look at that from the top, like a bird, from top to the bottom, to look at the landscape. Look at the landscape. That's why so many dots, and there's different colors. And some rivers use the dots as lines. The river, they always have a look at it from the top to the bottom. To look at the view is like that. It's quite a, we say as a flat, as a pattern, right? But the piece of, some area, some say red or yellow, the dots or coming together, all that. So there could be area of the green, or area of some land, or some river, or some. But that river or that, they did not really, we say, from the one angle, from this angle or that angle. They're always from the top. Right? That's why sometimes you paint it. When you look at it from the air, you can look at it from this side. You always from top, from this side. Then you can shift it, move your paintings around. That still is about the region. So that's the view is very different. And also you're thinking how you use the tools, use the patterns or images to represent what did you want to tell about the story. That is about the interpretation of the meaning.
Yeah.
Is from your artist's view different. It's quite very, very different.
Yeah. Do you think that kind of different in interpretation comes from the differences in their culture? For example, like, do you think the way they painted landscape, I mean the Aboriginal people, the way they painted the landscape is different from the ancient Chinese? Is that because our culture is different? And what kind of differences is in the culture when you been with them?
Okay, Chinese culture is Chinese culture, Aboriginal culture is Aboriginal culture. They are very different. We can tell very easily. And for me, is in the middle. I have been trained. I have my culture background as trained as a Chinese painter and educated in China, right? And then now also I learned the original culture here, right? To me as an artist, bring these two cultures together, right? And curated a different, I'm not saying different culture, just combining these two cultures together and then make a new thing or new philosophy or new thing, right? So how are we going to combine these two together or bring them together, mix them? That is my job, and to bring them together, it's my job really, it's my job. And that becomes some artwork. You can see the artwork coming out, and then you can see some influence, some images, some patterns, some elements. You can see you can read it from the paintings. For instance, the material I'm using quite a lot about the rice paper. Rice paper is material, but also you can tell it's the culture. If you use the bark, from Malabar, we paint on, of course, there is the original culture. They use the bark a lot. It's quite a very meaningful. You use the cross etching, all the stuff. That is, that's all the different.
Yeah. Okay. So What is it in the Aboriginal culture that, culture or painting or arts that keep inspiring you to explore and to keep incorporate them together? What is it in the Aboriginal paintings?
It's not about the painting itself. If we're talking about the dogs paintings, yes, the dogs painting is very, the color, the view, and the thinking, when we say there's something here as a landscape here, I look at the landscape is what I can see it, right? Yeah. Tree, green, yellow, or whatever, mountain, right? That's how I've been trained, how I see it. But for Aboriginal people, they have different, same thing, they thinking a little bit different. And when they have a little bit different, that they painted out is different, right? And I was very interested in how they are different, how their thinking is different the way as I do. Yeah. Right. Sometimes I do follow up. I just say, why you see this mountain is not like a standard out or fall down? How? Right? How? Why? As many others, is like a culture and how you connected with the landscape, natural landscape. To many people, we say, okay, that's very harsh work. We down here is too hot. And what I can see is like what I can see. Right? But it's how much connection with the landscape, right? Environment. But for Aboriginal people, if they come from local, it's totally different, right? Very, very different. They have very emotion. They know all the story behind this land and the landscape, and they can tell many, many different stories and happening. Right, and there's some very old stories, some very new, some new happen. So they all make the sense as a culture, right? And when they paint the landscape, right, with all the story, with all the emotion, with all the love, everything, and that make a lot of difference, with make difference, which is like others. People just look at what they look, what they can see it, right? They can see it. Is it from the in of the person or from just outside of where you can see it? It's very much different. So that all attracted me, and also rock paintings, rock paintings, cave paintings, all that stuff. So they're all very attracted to me, and understanding the landscape and the environment. That's how I learned. That's quite a lot from the time I lived in the bush, right? In the bush, because we live in the city for so long, and we just have a look at all the concrete blocks. Too many people will say very exciting. This is our life. Yeah, I agree with that. This is our life. Yeah, but sometimes for different people like me, I'll probably have different thoughts, a bit different thoughts. I quite like it living in the bush. It's quite interesting to many people to say nothing, but to me, I thought it's a lot to read, a lot to see, a lot to connect to it and to learn as well. I'll just give you an example. Sometimes we say, it's not many communication if we live in the bush. You only small group put together, not like a colorful lifestyle like in the city. You can karaoke, or you can drink, you can bow, you can friends talking. There's so many activities. Yes, they're beautiful. All beautiful. But also, I think the people living in the city, they missed out to something else as well. Like in the bush, natural. We still can talk to each other in the bush by talking about it with the environment. For some people, we just say we have the connection with the trees, the river, the region, the water, the area where you live. Some ceremony would happen here, This bring us lots of memories, and the time to time and continually happen. But not to say, 10, 20 years ago what happened, now everything stopped. No, they all continually happening. Yeah. So it's another different lifestyle and also life experience. Is more interested to me, really.
Yeah, definitely very interesting to see the Aboriginal, and also like they have quite unique connection with the nature, with the landscape, and this is something that I think the urban people living in urban might draw on later on. Yeah. So I also noticed that there are quite a few images that from your painting, you have painted quite a lot of portrait of indigenous people, and they're often used you often use a lot of like quite strong brush strokes to paint them. And so I'm wondering, what is the story that you want to tell about them, about the Aboriginal community?
Okay, the portraits you saw, that was from many years ago, from beginning when I lived in the communities.
Yeah.
I did quite a lot of portrait, with brush strokes. It's a very strong images, and it gives me feeling when I met other people, and just try to explore the power from the land, from the people, from everything from the region. Even we talk about the rock or trees, in the very strong, solid, the power. And behind this power, there's lots meaningful stories. Right? So for instance, I was painted, I think some figure, very, very strong figure. I only painted the back of the man with very strong brush strokes. And I do not need to paint the face, but only from the body, from the back of the man. It gives a lot of message already. You can read a lot of message from the back, right? From the back. It's very strong, very powerful, very powerful. I will tell about the power. I'll probably say this is the message I was trying to explore. Yeah.
Yes, I think we have already covered a lot of very interesting topics so far. So is there anything else you would like to share with us that I haven't covered? Or any suggestion you want to say to people who are interested and keen to learn more about either Aboriginal culture or Chinese culture?
There's a lot to talk about, in different Okay, I'll just give you 2 or 3, maybe, whether it's my thoughts to your audience. One, to make friends with Aboriginal people, or if you interested in Aboriginal culture, first of all, you should pay more respect. Respect the people, respect the culture.
Yes.
Right, that's very important. Right, that's very, very important. You can assist, help, Aboriginal people, but not try not go too over. Right. And 2, open mind. Just open the mind. You respect it, just like I respect you. I open my mind. We're sharing a lot of things. Things we're sharing, learning, each other. Dialogues, not just dialogue, each other as always. And the Aboriginal people really friendly, they like to learn a lot of different things. I talk about our artists, collaborated with me, all artists and others, they like to learn a lot from you as well, as well. Even we're talking about some very sensitive, because in the subject, when we, as artists, you've been dealing with it, this is very sensitive, very sensitive. But I don't think you need to scare about that, so because there's a lot around in this society. I would still say there's lots of gatekeepers, right? Not gatekeepers. Oh, you can do this one, you cannot do this one. This is what we hear all the time. Respect, open your mind. Even very sensitive, you still can open your mind. You're learning. Everywhere we are learning, sharing, right? And then last is always update our knowledge of the Aboriginal culture. When we listen to some people, the experts say, okay, this and that, yeah, that's correct. But also we need updates. So we cannot just say, okay, one stage we heard this person say, experts say A, then we just stick with the A, just say, okay, nothing changed because he says A, and we have to believe as A. But sometimes the culture is still need to change it, develop it. We need to update our knowledge as well.
Yes, definitely.
That happens a lot. So that is what I think I tell people, if you are interested in the Aboriginal culture and the people or some projects, you can follow.
Yeah.
That's my suggestion. Yeah, that's how I do anyway.
Yes, I think it's very important for us to be open-minded, to update our knowledge and share with others, as well as being critical. So thank you very much for joining us today, Mr. Zhou, and I hope our audience who are listening to this podcast now have enjoyed it as much as I did.